Allah could not have been more explicit about the rulings of in the Quran, but yet we as a qawm, as a people, always mess it up. Any ideas what they are? Inheritance is one, and another is divorce. Maybe it's another conversation for another day, right? But the rules of divorce are simple. It's so clear cut. It's so obvious. This is what a talaq and marratan, or imsakun bil ma'ruf, or tasrihun bil ihsan. Like all of the rulings of divorce are so obviously delineated right in the mushaf, in the text of the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we always mess it up. I can't tell you, Brother Naveed, aside from estate planning, right? You do...
divorce is my primary.
Okay, he does divorce primary. Why is this guy a successful, mashallah, Allahumma barik. Why is he a successful lawyer? Because we always mess up the idea of divorce. And the other thing, mashallah, that he's successful in, is law practice, is the estate planning. There is not, I don't care how religious you are, or how irreligious you are, almost always we mess up the process of inheritance. So, that being the case, it's not, okay, this is just who we are, let's accept it. Let's now do something about it. So for that reason, inshallah ta'ala, we've invited, alhamdulillah, our esteemed panelists, Dr. Qurrat Al-Ain and Brother Husain, Naveed Husain, to be here today with us, so that we can get some clarity, inshallah ta'ala, with regards to what are the legal aspects, what are the Islamic aspects, what are the medical decision makings that come into play when we reach these points in our lives.
But the Sharia is so different. This Sharia, this dignity, these rules come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created us, who knows us. And so, in terms of the law, right, it's derived, as we all know, from the Quran first and foremost, from the Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas. There's different ways of how we derive law, but it all goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other beauty of Islamic law is that it is decentralized. What do I mean by that? Some of us were into Bitcoin, right? Decentralized. But basically, the Islamic legal framework is made in such a way that, mashallah, we have our shuyukh, we have our ulama, who all inherited this. And they're spread across the world. And the same way that the Quran is preserved, it's spread. It's decentralized. It's not like you could kill one person and the Quran is gone. It's not like you could attack one person and deen is gone. Allah has made this deen in a way where it's decentralized, and the ulama and the shuyukh, when they get together, they can derive laws from the Sunnah, from the Quran, as we mentioned here. And as US law is there for freedom, Islam is there to develop the individual, to develop society, and to develop morality. So you can already see the divergence of the goals of US law and the goals of the Sharia. Alhamdulillah. Imam Ghazali, he talks about maqasid al-Sharia. What is the purpose of these deens? So when we're looking at inheritance, we're looking at these different fractions as we'll go through. You might ask yourself, why? Why do I have to pray a certain way? Why do I have to sit a certain way? Why do I have to do X, Y, Z a certain way? But subhanAllah, if we look at these rules and these regulations and these laws, you can plug it into one of these 5 categories that Imam Ghazali, who 1,000 years ago, described to us. That everything goes back to the preservation of our deen. Everything goes back to the preservation of our souls. It goes back to the preservation of our mind, of our inheritance, of our offspring, of our wealth. We don't do drugs because we want to protect our mind. We marry and have children so that we can preserve the lineage. We have property rights to preserve wealth. So we'll start to see that these calculations and the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outlines these fractions, it goes back to these goals of the Sharia. So I'm not going to go through all of this, right? This is just to show you, subhanAllah, as Imam Hisham mentioned, that the 2 areas of practice that I focus on, family law, divorce, and estate planning, as Shaykh mentioned, are the 2 most discussed topics in the Quran. We look at salah, it doesn't say stand up, raise your hands, make ruku, make sujood, no. But when it comes to inheritance, it is so detailed. SubhanAllah, you should, inshallah, when you have the moment, look at Surah An-Nisa, ayahs 11 through 14, and there's some ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah that talk about in detail the different rights of the people that you leave behind. Subhanallah. The Prophet ﷺ has said it is not permissible for any Muslim who has something to give to go more than 2 nights without a will. It should be kept ready with him, so much so that it's under his pillow. Subhanallah. This is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has us focus on the reality that we are all going to die one day. There's another, subhanallah, beautiful hadith that learn the science of inheritance because it is from your religion. It is half of knowledge. Subhanallah. So if we're learning this, inshallah, we'll dive deeper. And if we can master this, and it's very difficult to master. I'm just a entry-level student as it comes to this area. But this is half of knowledge, because from this you can derive societal rules and inshallah save us in the akhirah. So as we continue, inshallah, I first want to talk about property. What is property, right? We're talking about inheritance, we're talking about your assets, we're talking about your houses, we're talking about those things that you have spent the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years accumulating. The reason that many of us migrated to this country is for this property that we accumulated. And subhanAllah, we don't plan and it all goes to the state and people fight over it, subhanAllah. But let's just talk about property. The way they teach us about property in law school is that it's like a bundle of sticks. So think about owning a house. If you own a house, you have the right to possess it, meaning you have the right to live in it. You have the right to sell it. You have the right to lease it. You have the right to burn it down. You have the right to do whatever you want with that house. And if you look at all those rights, each one of these sticks represent a different right that you have in this property. And it'll make a little bit more sense later, inshallah. So that's the first thing. Property, the ownership of property, you have many different rights that come with that ownership. Okay, the other thing I want to mention, just in passing, is, my primary area is actually divorce and family law. And unfortunately, not many massages want to talk about this area, but I'm just going to plug it really quickly, right? Because when it comes to property, the US has this convoluted idea of property that once you get married, the moment you get married, whatever the husband acquires, whatever the wife acquires, it belongs to both of them. We don't have this concept of jointness. It's not like you become one person, one entity when you get married. Rather, under Islamic law, the wife is the wife, the husband is the husband. And I was just going to say that the only way that we can really ensure that our marriages and our divorces are going to be in line with Islamic law is through prenuptial agreements. Different discussion. And if you want to learn more, inshallah, you could visit the nikahmasterclass.com. All right, diving a little bit deeper. So the reality is that we cannot implement the Sharia without action, whether that's in your marriage or that's if you pass away, right? And that's where we're talking about a will. You have to write a will. You have to do something in order for your assets to be distributed according to the Quranic mandate. You can't just sit back and hope that, my sister will take care of it, my wife, my husband will take care of it. Because the law of the land has generic rulings that are in place if you do not do a will. The state has made your will, and the only way to override it is creating your own will. 55% of American adults do not have a will. How many of us have a will? 4%. MashaAllah. And the reality is that this non-planning leads to billions of dollars being spent on lawyers primarily. Out of the $2 billion that go through the probate court, go through inheritance fighting, 1.5 of that goes to lawyers. SubhanAllah. So what is estate planning? So with estate planning, what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid conflicts. We're trying to limit costs, transfer assets efficiently to the next generation, making sure that things are done correctly, we save on taxes, and we don't leave our family fighting after us. And some tools of estate planning include wills, trusts, healthcare powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney, which we'll dive into a little bit. And the worst case is litigation. What is litigation? Litigation is when people pass away, the siblings are left, and actually inheritance fighting is worse than divorce, to be honest with you. Because in divorce you have two people, but when you have inheritance, you have 5, 6 siblings with their own spouses and 5 different opinions. SubhanAllah, you can imagine how crazy that gets. I have a case that when I started law school in 2010, is still fighting now. 15 years later, they're still in court fighting over the same land. He had all these acres in the East Coast, and it started making money, fracking, and they got oil from it, all these different things. Until today, 15 years later, the whole Khandan is still fighting over this property and has already spent $1.3 million on attorney's fees. Subhanallah. So estate planning from our perspective is twofold, right? We have something called the wasiya and we have the mirath. Wasiya is what you get to dictate. You get to dictate a certain portion of your estate up to 1/3 the way that you want. But the rest of it is according to Allah in the Quran. So we don't have a choice of what the mirath is. There's standard people who will inherit from you, and you have the right to go up to 1/3. And so much so, it's not even that you're supposed to go up to 1/3. 1/3 is more of a concession. That if your family is needy, or if you have your children, they have the right, but you have the leeway to give up to 1/3.
Can you explain mirath once again?
Mirath is the Quranic prescribed distribution. Wasiya is what you want to give.
No, that we understand.
Yeah, so mirath is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us is the distribution. So if you don't have an estate plan, you didn't do a will, you didn't do a trust, you didn't do anything, what's going to happen? State law is going to control, and now they're going to look on your property. Okay, they look at each asset one by one. Okay, your house. Is there a joint owner? No joint owner? Okay, we're going to distribute it the way that the state wants. You have a 401k, you didn't name a beneficiary? Okay, we're going to distribute it the way that we want. And this could become even more complicated if you have a blended family, second marriage, you have stepchildren, those types of things. These become much, much more complicated. The question is, who's going to make sure that your assets are distributed? How will you be buried? Who's going to take care of your kids? If for no other reason to get a will, this is the reason. That if we pass away without a will, husband and wife pass away without a will, have not named a guardian, what's going to happen? People start petitioning the court and saying, I want to be the guardian. And you might think, oh, mashallah, such a wonderful brother. But the reality, what I've seen over the last 15 years is the people who step up, they step up because they see the child has money, and now this guardian is going to have control over that money. So for no other reason to have a will, you can name a guardian who's going to take care of your children, at the very least. And if you don't have a will, you're looking at extra time, you're looking at extra money, you're looking at fines, you're looking at fees. One myth I will dispel is that if you don't have a will, it doesn't mean everything goes to the state. It just means that a lot of time and money and fees are wasted because you did not have a will. All right, so what's the simple solution? Get a will. That is the simple solution, subhanAllah.
Can guardian be one of our kids?
If they're over 18, yes.
But suppose you have many children, then you must have a will. But suppose there only one child.
You still need a will.
Everything goes automatically to the child. So why will?
It doesn't go automatic. So I think maybe we'll have a Q&A, but that's the whole point, is that it's not automatic. You have to go through a court process.
I die. No, everything go to my daughter.
Yeah. So, just again, I know that's what we think, right? Is that if we only have one child, everything's going to go to that child. But the problem is you're going through the filter of court, and you left 100,000. By the time it gets to your daughter, it's 50,000. Right? So by having a will, it makes it smoother. It makes it cheaper. You don't have to go through all these fees, all these fines, all the lawyers, etc., etc. Right? So the will is the easiest solution.
But I think what she's pertaining it to is that if you have a beneficiary.
Yeah, beneficiary is different.
100%, then it goes to a child.
Oh yeah, if you have a beneficiary, that's totally different. But how do you name a beneficiary for your house? Right? Yeah, accounts, 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, okay, you name a beneficiary. But what about your house? That's your biggest asset usually. Right? And I think, again, what I'd like to do is, inshallah, we'll get through the presentation, and sister will go through her presentation, and then inshallah we'll do questions, inshallah. So in your will, you want to make sure that you pay for your last illness first, you pay for your funeral, you pay for your debts. If you want to give up to 1/3 in charity or for your kafara, go ahead and do that. And the remaining will go to your inheritors as appointed by the Quran. And obviously I can't go through everybody's situation and tell you 1/6 mom, 1/6 dad. That'll be very difficult, but you could always reach out to me for that. The will appoint an executor who is in charge to make sure everything is paid for. All my debts are paid, my taxes are paid, all my children have gotten their share. Making sure burial and funeral rites are spelled out in your will. Especially if you come from a non-Muslim family or you are a Muslim, you want to make sure that this is in your will. Guardianship of minor children, you'll name a guardian in your will, and this has to be typed and signed by 2 disinterested witnesses. Okay, meaning people who don't inherit from you. So a will is a great tool. Everybody should have a will. Every Muslim in America should have a will. There's some cons to it, right? For example, joint property, meaning that, for example, husband and wife own a house together, okay? They're both on the title. They're joint owners. If husband passes away, according to American law, it belongs to the wife 100%. If wife passes away, it goes to husband 100%. But the Quran tells us something very different, right? So we kind of have this problem when it comes to joint property, and we could talk about that in more detail. And the second con is not a deal breaker, but something called probate court. Okay, so what is probate court? The will is actually a letter to the court, a letter to the state, to let the state know who is in charge, how will my assets get distributed. So what happens is that somebody will take your will, they go to court, they get it validated, and they say, come back in 1 year and prove to me that everything has been distributed. The more property you have, the longer this court process takes. If the children disagree, the longer it takes, right? So it could take 1 year to, like I said, in my case, I have a 15-year-old case. And this probate process, if you have a house, you have some beneficiaries listed on things, okay, it might be very easy for you. But it could be costly without proper planning. If you have multiple houses, if you have multiple children, if you have a house, this could become much, much more costly. So the question is, how do we then, so that's level 1. Let me just stop there for a second. Level 1 is everybody should have a will. Yes, that will goes to the probate court. It's not the end of the world. But there are ways to avoid this court process, right? We could do it by assigning a joint property, as we kind of said, add somebody to the title. That's they call it the cheap man's estate planning, is add a joint owner, right? The other way is have a beneficiary. As brother mentioned, if you have a beneficiary listed on your accounts, okay, you avoid probate. Whoever you listed, it's going to go to that person, no problem. But your house is usually the problem. But there are 2 solutions, okay? I'll talk about the last one first. One is called a transfer on death instrument. It's basically a document to allow you to name a beneficiary for your property. So just like you have a deed, you know, your name's on the deed, it's recorded, there's a stamp on the top right. In that same way, we could enter something called a transfer on death instrument that will be attached to your deed that says if the people named on the deed pass away, it belongs to these people. So that's an easy solution. Another solution is a trust. Okay? If we had more time, I'll go more into it. But basically, a trust is an entity, like just like you have a company, right? And this company owns property or owns, you know, a bank account or whatever. A trust is kind of the same thing. It's just a figment of your imagination. You create a trust, it's a document, and let's call it the Naveed Husain Trust. So this Naveed Husain Trust is going to own this property. So when we look at the property, it says Naveed Husain Trust is the owner instead of Naveed Husain. And just by that little change, we're able to avoid probate. And now this document, the trust document, is going to dictate who the beneficiaries of that property is. So in this trust, you could have houses, you could have businesses, you could have basically whatever you want. And this will avoid probate court. It can protect money for the children. It can help you in taxes. It can make it more specific so that the Islamic distribution actually takes place. Because what I mentioned with the will is that it's a great start. You should do a will. But this problem of joint property becomes an issue. And you can fix that with a trust. And maybe in the Q&A we can go through that a little bit more. The only thing I'm going to mention here is the special needs trust. So the other beauty of a trust is that, for example, if you have a child who is disabled or needs government assistance, and you pass away, and now that child inherits money, what's going to happen? They're going to get disqualified. They're going to get disqualified from governmental aid because now they have more than $2,000. Subhanallah, this country, this state says that if you have more than $2,000, too bad, so sad, you're on your own. So with the special needs trust, if we have a child who has a disability or special needs, we can create a trust so that they do not get disqualified from governmental benefits and they still have money to pay for whatever they need to pay for. Right? So that's another way that a trust could be used.
Does that apply to Medicare?
So there's something called, that's what, not Medicare, Medicaid. Medicaid is where you have the $2,000 limit. So it's going to be Medicaid. All right, I'm not going to go into this. Inshallah, our sister will go into this a little bit more. But another part of estate planning is planning for incapacity. What happens, may Allah protect us, if we have coma, dementia, Alzheimer's, something where we cannot make our own decisions? It's very important that we plan and we appoint people to make our healthcare and our financial decisions in case we are in that predicament. Right? So healthcare power of attorney, you appoint somebody to say whether you should stay on life support or whether you should get a second opinion or get transferred. So you're appointing somebody to make that decision. Otherwise, what happens is that all the siblings, everybody starts saying, no, keep them on, take them off, do this, do that. With the power of attorney, you give the decision to one person. Same thing financial, and inshallah, our sister will talk a little bit more about the other options that we have. As we wrap up, right, a lot of us, we look at online wills. Again, if at the end of the day, you're not going to go to a lawyer and the only thing you're going to do is a will, online will, okay, fine. All right. But subhanAllah, the way that we plan our entire life, and we have hundreds and thousands of dollars and we're going to go spend $99 on an online will, you get what you pay for. But my advice is to avoid them. Right? They're too general. They're not in compliance with Islamic law, with state laws, because each state has different rules. And also a lot of the online wills that we find have Islamic knowledge in our language in them. They have a whole preamble, right, of the Shahada, which is beautiful. But if you're in front of a white judge who doesn't like Muslims and they see your will, it's like, oh man, this is Sharia law. I don't want this. Right? So you have to write the will in a way that it appeases the guy sitting in the robe, right? Unfortunately. So if people can give their money to their cats, we have the right to give our money the way that we want to give it, but we have to do it properly. And I'll end with just last slide inshallah. As I mentioned before, when you start thinking about the beauty of the inheritance laws, right? And I'm sure there's going to be a question in the Q&A, why do men get more than women? But to kind of buttress that that question is that the inheritance laws support the social laws of Islam. Just like the men have the financial responsibility to take care of their spouse and their mothers and their sisters, that in that same way, the inheritance laws are going to support that social system. Okay? And us as a community, we need to really step up in this regard. When you look at the endowments of Harvard University and all of these institutions, it's because of estate planning. People put in their will that I want 1/3 to go to Islamic Foundation. People put that I want my property to go to Islamic Foundation so that Islamic Foundation doesn't have to have yearly dinners, yearly fundraising dinners. Rather, the money that is in this endowment supports that institution. That's what we need to reach. We need to be able to use our money in a way so that we can establish hospitals and clinics and domestic violence shelters and all these different things, and it's going to come through proper estate planning. And I'll end there, inshallah.